Good morning and welcome to Unusual Activity powered by FinancialJuice.com with George Avedon and Milton Marmonides. Thank you for joining us this 17th of December 2014, FOMC announcement day. All eyes on and ears on FOMC, and that's at 2 o'clock. And just as a reminder, there will be a live broadcast at 2 o'clock for the announcement on financialjuice.com. So, folks, tune in at 2. Let's continue with this morning. We have the futures higher by 8.00 at 1973 even on the S&P 500 futures. We have oil this morning lower by $1.33 at $54.98. Also gold, we have higher by $4.50 at $1,198.90. So we did go below the just at that 1200 mark, 1199.1. On the DXY, we have the dollar index at 88.186. That's higher this morning by 0.061. We have the euro lower this morning by 0.0019 at 1.2476. Also in the news, certainly we'll get in a little bit deeper into this, but certainly the ruble, lots of volatility, lots of conversations around desks with respect to specifically the ruble and what Russia will do about it, and we'll get involved in that as well. So let's and a quick check of the 10-year here, folks. We have the 10-year at 2.080, and we'll also get into the specifics of the CPI that came out as well. And then we'll get into what also is making news around desks this morning, in particular securities. Also, we'll have Milton's view on technical analysis, certainly on the heels of yesterday's day. It's one of those really rare days, folks, that we saw yesterday. We had a risk-off trade in the pre-market, and immediately in the opening rotation, we had just a really significant beginning of a rebound, a massive amounts of volatility intraday. We had near a 100-point round trip in the S&P 500 yesterday, and it closed near the lows. That I must say, and we'll have Milton's thoughts on this in a few minutes, very rare that you see a market like we saw yesterday, such violent moves both to the upside and the downside on such a huge scale. You tend to have moves that are maybe within ranges, 5, 10, 15 handle or point moves. To have 40, 50-point moves within a day, both on the positive and the negative, both on the upside and the downside, rather impressive moves in the S&P 500. So the S&P 500 finished lower at 0.85% at 1972.74. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lower by 0.65% at 17,068.87. We've mentioned this before with respect to the Dow Jones. We're almost at a near 1,000-point move in the Dow Jones since the near high of 18,000. And this has been one of the quietest sell-offs we've seen in a very long time. Again, being really objective here, but folks, 1,000-point difference in the Dow is significant, and not many people are discussing that. So it's rather, again, very interesting. Whether you're a bull or bear, you have to acknowledge These are some significant moves here. Nasdaq lower by 1.24% yesterday. It finished at 47.83. Let's move on. What are we seeing in the markets today? Certainly, the bigger picture on the geopolitical events, on the macroeconomic events, really is this notion of we keep on mentioning oil, and it is having an effect on individual countries, and it is having an effect on individual companies, the larger companies, the smaller companies. And there could be some political strife over this in both the shorter and the medium term. In politics, folks typically have a short-term memory, but when you have certain indicators that are causing a little bit of pain, quite a bit of pain at times, a little bit of geopolitical tensions pipe up a bit. So that's something that we're monitoring very closely. Certainly keeping an eye on the Middle East with respect to ISIS, ISIL. Also keeping an eye on Russia. We'll get into a little bit more specific in that. But really, what are Russia's next steps here? Not just with Ukraine. That's been relatively quiet. It seems as though, as we've talked about before, the fact that anything that's coming out with respect to Russia and the Ukraine and how it functions and any particular discussions or fighting, the market has seemed as though to internalize that news, and we've seen that to be the true, at least in the last couple of months to weeks or so. So also on Russia's side, certainly the ruble has been in conversation. The volatility in the ruble is astonishing. Rates in Russia, government bonds at 14.76%. There's talk of capital controls. Will Russia institute capital controls? And folks, capital controls really come into play when we talk about when there's investors in Russia, from outside of Russia, and wanting to get those monies out of Russia. Are there constraints on that? What is the government going to do about that? Are they already doing that to some extent? The ruble has been discussed by the central bank. Also, Medvedev spoke just overnight into this morning, indicating that there has to be support for the ruble, and really this notion of those folks that were around in trading in 1998. This is a strikingly interesting and somewhat similar situation in Russia. Certainly, we've come a long way since that time with respect to progression of Russia as a country. But again, as Yohei Elam mentioned yesterday as well, it's certainly on the minds of traders, investors, as they watch what happens with Russia. Also, keeping an eye on this oil, down $1.27 at 54.98 currently. We discussed that 55 is a level that we're monitoring very closely, and as you should as well. For this morning, in terms of economic data, again, FOMC meeting announcement at 2 p.m. and at 2:30 will be the press conference with Janet Yellen, and that's all going to be broadcast live on financialjuice.com, so definitely tune in to that. Baltic Dry Index falls 1.3% to 827 points. we had the Mortgage Bankers Association purchase applications. We had the core CPI come in this morning, month over month for November was 0.10%, and also for core CPI year over year for November was 1.7. Prior was 1.8. So we had the biggest drop in consumer prices since December 2008. And one of the things that we've been discussing here is the fact that oil does have an effect on clearly not just producer prices, but consumer prices. We discussed this yesterday with Milton. We discussed this yesterday with Yohei. Now, certainly the longer term implication of that certainly is we'll see how that unravels, and as we provide more color, we'll see how that turns out. But again, it's something that is the decrease in oil certainly has an effect on that. And folks, we've been a bit harping on oil a little bit, but it's a big deal as it affects a huge piece of macroeconomic and geopolitical events. EIA petroleum status at 10:30 that we're waiting for, and also, as we said, the FOMC chairperson press conference at 2:30, and of course that's Janet Yellen. And the discussion here is our thought is will we see a removal of the considerable time phrase? Will it be substituted for something else? Is this considerable time phrase becoming ubiquitous? Is it more or less absorbed within the market that it's going to be taken out? And as we discussed yesterday, what are the possible other statements that the Fed is going to announce and discuss? And one of the other things that came through this morning, certainly lower than expected earnings from FedEx, and certainly it's been a bit of a economic bellwether with respect to perhaps a leading indicator as the company that and UPS certainly logistics and taking a good view on what's happening in the economy with respect to very active shipments and details on that. So a few more things coming out geopolitically. We have the Greek presidential vote today as well, so we'll see how that turns out. Also, as we said, the Russian Prime Minister Medvedev said measures need to be in place to prevent jumps in ruble. So clearly, the central bank government officials are very concerned about the ruble, and we'll also continue to monitor the situation, see what impact that has on the rest of the markets. In Asia, in Nikkei was higher by 0.38%. In Hang Seng, lower by 0.37%. Shanghai higher by 1.31%. We'll also take a look at Europe, and then we'll dive into technical analysis with Milton in just a moment or so. FTSE lower by 0.76%. CAC in Paris lower by 0.72%. DAX in Germany lower by 0.85%, and the IBEX in Spain is lower by 1.19%. So we had a little bit of an improvement in Europe, and so we'll continue to monitor the markets there. Milt, let's dive into technical analysis. As I said in the very beginning, and you and I talked about this quite in depth offline towards the end of the day yesterday, the move in the ES and the S&P 500 yesterday was nothing short of astonishing. Very rarely do you have these type of days What are we, certainly the FOMC is coming in. And what's surprising to me is, Milton, usually the day before the FOMC is a little bit quieter days. We have December, it's the holidays. Boy, we're really not seeing this, this ho-hum markets turned into a bit of a melee yesterday.
Well, George, that's, look at the month of December. The month of December usually is a month of silence. Nothing really ever happens. It's a month where you can have 0.2% moves on a daily basis, and at the end of the year, everyone's happy, goes home, and is relaxed and stress-free. The market is. When's the last time we've seen a December act like this? It's kind of shocking. The market has dropped over 1,000 points from the highs, and yet many people, like you said earlier, are not really talking about it. But the question you have to also ask is the market has also come back in such a vicious rally off those lows in the end of October. So it's good to see a rollback. We've been mentioning it for a while that we wanted to see something like this. But typically for the month of December, you do not see this type of volatility. So it did not really shock me yesterday to see a 100-point handle move in the ES from highs to lows. Like right now, it's what everyone is saying. This has become a game. It's somewhat of a casino because typically these kinds of moves do not happen this time of year. It's usually a small, low volume, low volatility type moves. People are shocked. People really do not know what's really going on here. L. Arian said, made a comment earlier today. He's like, you have to let the market go back on its own 2 feet. You have to let it do what it needs to do. It cannot be continued to be manipulated because you're going to have these kinds of vicious moves. I agree with that. I think the market needs to go back to a free market, and not being, manipulated by outside sources. That's just my opinion, and I agree with L. Arian on that comment. Today, it could be another one of those days. You had, when we came in this morning, the ES was trading in 1981. We're trading in 1971, down 10 handles from those highs. Hit a low of 1968 just a few minutes ago. You're going to have the volatility again. You have the Fed, and you have the press conference today. So typically, on those press conference days, you may have a little difference so that they can have that explanation following the comments. What happens today, who really knows? Is oil going to affect their comments? Is the CPI this morning going to affect their comments? No one really knows at this point. You can throw a dart and just hopefully catch something, but no one's going to know exactly what's going on here. So we're looking at the afternoon trade this morning could be a little slow going into that trade at 2 p.m. Eastern time. I'll throw you a few levels that we're watching. On the ES, we're still below that 2,000 number. I still think right now, if we continue below 2,000, I think the bears are in charge. I think that a trade continue below, I think we can see that 1950 level support. Ideally, for a bullish move, you want to see a move above 2,000. We had one yesterday, but we had a complete reversal. You want to see a move above 2,000 and a close above 2,000 to substantiate that 2,000 level. Other than that, I think we're going to hit that 1950 level if we do not do that. We're watching those levels. We're watching the volume on the follow-through on those levels. And, keeping a close eye on what happens this afternoon. Does anything change? Does everything stay the same? And what is the reaction from the market to what the FOMC does or does not do? Those are the levels we're watching. You got the 1950 to 2000 range, 1950 to the downside, watching a 2000 to the upside, with a break and a close above that number on volume for a possible end to this, this drop that we're seeing right now. Regarding oil, real quick, yet again, oil. What are you going to say about oil? Oil's down every day, down again this morning. It was down yesterday, had a nice reversal on volume. We've mentioned that 55 number. We're watching that 55 number. We believe that number is something to keep a close eye on. If it could build the base here, you can see some sort of a bounce off of these recent lows. We're watching the number, we're watching the volume, we're watching the action. Ideally, the next level on this oil, low 50s. If that 50 breaks, you have the 40s. You know, that's a number where we have to go back years and years and years to see.
2009. That's right.
So it's a 5-year number. Could it happen? Yes. Who would have thought oil would be at $55 today? You know, if you can show me someone that's been mentioning when oil was trading about around 100 that we would see $55 oil by December, I would, I'd give them, I'd give them a clap. But other than that, what can you possibly say? Oil's at 55. We like this number here. We're watching it, keeping a close eye on it, seeing what happens at this level. The VIX, right now we're looking at the VIX is trading in that resistance point we mentioned yesterday on the 23 number. Closed at 23.57. Watching that level, watching those numbers. The support is at the 18 level. Higher resistance at 25. VIX is a better guess than, I don't know, because right now the volatility has been tremendous. The VIX has moved viciously off the lows of 12. What could be the next level? Who knows? But as of now, we're watching the VIX. 25 resistance to the upside, 18 support to the downside. Could see some large volatile moves going into the end of this year if these moves continue. Lastly, gold. We're mentioning gold for a while. That 1200 number. It's like it's a tractor beam on that number right now. If it breaks it, it's gonna go back to it. If it goes to the higher, it's gonna go back to that number. It should build the base here, and then it could dictate the next move, higher or lower. As of now, 1200 is the number in gold. Watching it, trading around it. Until we get a better distinction on the direction, we're gonna just step away and wait for that move to to ferment, and at that point we can decide on which direction the gold market is going to go. But as of now, 1200 is the number. 1150 downside, 1250 upside. George.
Thanks, Milt. So there you go, folks. That's your technical update for the morning and technical prep, if you will, in the larger traded indices and commodities. And again, the moral of the story is that it's the volume, it's the follow through. In order to get a significant move to one side or the other, volume is actually absolutely critical with respect to these technical moves. So let's switch back to the presentation for a bit, and we'll go over specifics on the commodities, energy, and raw materials. We have crude oil at 55.13. Again, Milton mentioned this 55 level, lower by $1.14 at $55.10. On the distillate side, gasoline lower by 0.0175 at 1.5235. Natural gas higher by 0.091 at 3.710. Heating oil lower by 0.0036 at 1.9570. Also, continuing with some precious metals here, gold, as we discussed, is at 1198. $1,198.20, higher by $3.90. Silver is higher by 0.058 at $15.81. Platinum higher by $5.10 at $1,201.60. Cocoa is higher by $1 at $29.15. Let's take a peek at now, as we discussed oil. Let's just show you these ETNs and ETFs that we watch when you're looking at oil, not just oil stocks, but the ETFs and ETNs. Some of these are shorts, some of these are longs, two times, 3 times volatility. and good to watch, even if they're not in your portfolio, but good to get your head around how these function in relation to actual oil fluctuations. So that's what we do. You know, when we put up indices and we watch indices, what's the correlation between oil and underlying securities? What's the correlation between oil and for example, the OIH, and and how all that corresponds together. So, you know, we wanted to bring that up as well. Um, so let's dive into the rate environment. Currently, the 10-year at 1.533, a bit lower than when we started the show. That's the 5-year 1.533, 10-year at 2.076. Again, a little bit lower yield. Looks like a little bit of a bid in the 5 and 10-year, and a little bit of a bid in the 30-year at 2.713, was at 2.726, so a little bit of a lower yield going into this morning's trading, which opens in approximately 5 minutes. Also, the dollar index versus 10 other currencies at 88.209, higher by 0.84. Which is, if we take a look on a daily, we'll show this chart for you folks. If we take a look at the daily here, we do see it's a bit off its low, a bit off its highs, and you know, if you track the market, perhaps you see a little bit of a correlation there in the ES. So we can take a look there. A little bit of a correlation there as we hit the high in the dollar and the high in the ES. A little bit of a tail off, a little bit of a, you know, I don't want to call it a sell off, but certainly a little bit of a profit taking in that dollar and also in the ES. Also, so again, keeping an eye on the dollar. If we take a look at intraday, looks like the dollar is just off its highs at high of the morning was 88.328, currently at 88.21. So again, we'll continue to monitor that. And again, the relationship between the dollar and the stock market does change sometimes. It was some time ago that the lower dollar pointed to a higher market, but again, really watching how as things shift. And we'll continue to keep an eye on that for you. Let's switch back to the presentation here. So we discussed technical analysis here. Also, we want to excuse me, we want to bring up some specific stocks that are making news this morning. Certainly FedEx down over $8 this morning, currently at $169 pre-market on earnings, was low as $165.22. Again, currently $169 in FedEx. And again, FedEx does tend to be a bit of a bellwether. We'll see how if statements for the FOMC, if there's any mention of CPI, and also just wanted to bring this up as we talked about yesterday, will the Fed bring up global economic slowdown in their statements today? That would be very interesting. VOLC, Volcano Corporation, higher this morning, agrees to be acquired by Philips for $18 a share in cash. Total deal valued at $1 billion. Currently at $17.83. CERS, Cirrus Corp, currently at $5.62. Higher in pre-market clearly. Confirms FDA approval for Intercept blood system for plasma. So again, we'll see how that turns into trading this morning. All Verizon Wireless at currently $45.34. Bernstein coming out saying concerns are overdone for Verizon. So again, Verizon currently at $45.34. WCC Wesco International indicating currently at $71.50. They had a 300 million share repurchase program. We saw yesterday in the aftermarket towards the close of the day, so a little bit of a volume spike within the last it looks like 15 minutes or so of in WCC. A couple of more things, and what we'll do, we'll start getting into the insider purchases. FedEx again. Many take FedEx to heart because they say they dictate how the economy is going. So again, FedEx does tend to be a little bit of a bellwether with respect to economic activity, and so we'll see how the rest of the actual trading progresses as we begin trading. It's 9:30 in New York now, and trading has begun. So let's go over some of these insider trades, insider transactions that are we feel that are important to note. HGBL, we have let's see, several folks purchasing about 600,000 shares at 35 cents. Nothing yet in pre-market or in early trading, but we'll keep an eye on that. UGI Corp. Let's see. General Counsel Secretary purchased 2,000 shares at $36.45. Stock is just about to open. FOXF, excuse me. Fox Factory Holdings currently at $15.91. CEO purchasing just under 30,000 shares at $15.35. We see that higher in early trading by a little bit over 2%. Also, WMS, we had this more insider purchases here, 4,000 at $21.88, currently at $21.37, higher by about a third of a percent this morning. CLNE, Clean Energy Fuels, we had a 12,000 share purchase at $4.40, currently at $4.59, higher by about 4.5% this morning. GBDC, Golub Capital, CEO, 10,000 share purchase at $17.24, and also the chairman purchases 10,000 at $17.24. We'll see where the stock is trading. One moment here, a minor technical issue. We'll go on to the next one as we're GBDC. So let's see if we can. So currently at $16.91 initial, lower by lower by 0.65%. Terex Corp. David Sachs, director, purchased 5,000 shares at $26.41. Currently, the security is at $25.58. Just beginning to trade in that stock. PGN, Paragon Offshore, CEO purchases 33,000 shares, just under $3, currently at $2.96, indicating higher by 1.37%. That's Paragon Offshore. SFBS, we have Service First Bank shares. We have initial at $30.48, higher by 30%. PRGX, director purchases 15,000 shares at $5.06, currently at $5.41, higher just a little bit, about 0.2% this morning. Yum Brands, we have 10,000 share purchase at $69.18, currently $69.21, up about 1/3%. Continuing on with insider purchases, LC Lending Club, we have a insider purchase of 20,000 shares and a CFO purchase of 7,500 shares, both at 15. So remember, that's a recent IPO, currently at $26.46, higher by 1.8%. Alexion Pharmaceuticals, currently at $177.18. Director purchased 500 shares at $186.99, lower by 0.3%. CLMS, a CEO purchase of 19,000 shares at $12.47, at $12.25 currently, up about 0.25%. Sanchez Energy SN, we did have a director purchase at 10,000 shares at 6.88, and plus some other small buys. Currently, stock is higher by 3.36%. We like to see that because with this precipitous decline in oil, a decline in specific smaller names, we like to see this directors, CFOs, CEOs purchasing these really beaten down securities as a sign of not just skin in the game, but a little bit of a reinforcement, if you will, to the shareholder. So I think that's really important. Hero as well. Hercules Offshore, we have a director purchase 250,000 shares at $1.11. Currently, the stock is at $1.08, higher by just under 5%. Again, very important that we see this activity. We see within these within these securities that have just been, clobbered as of late. SFXE Entertainment, we have board of directors purchasing 30,000 shares at $3.85. Currently, the stock is at, take a look, in intraday at $3.80, lower by about 0.5%. So again, not always will we see an immediate focus on, perhaps to the upside when we have these insider purchases, but very important to monitor these securities both from the short term and into the future. AXPW, we have so this is the syndicates. We'll run through the syndicates real quickly, and also we'll take a look at where the markets are. We do have the ES futures higher by 9.25 at 1973.50. We have oil lower by 90 cents at $55.36. Certainly that 55 level is continuing to be a critical level. And gold at 1197.70. Remember that 2000 level is critical as well. So let's spend a brief moment on syndicates. AXPW. Excuse me. AXPW. We have a 7.6 million mixed security shelf. Those of you who don't typically watch syndicates or read about syndicates, this is just an opportunity for the company to issue more shares, certainly to get more funding. Maybe it's R&D, research and development. Maybe it's borrowing. So a mixed security shelf is really a mix of equities, mix of preferreds, could be convertibles, fixed income. So it could be a mishmash of securities as you're looking in and reading into this a little bit more. AXPW, we're not seeing anything. We don't see anything yet this morning on AXPW. BVX, Bowie Medical Corp, again, $25 million mixed security shelf at $3.20. Currently not getting much volume on that yet. CPAH, $50 million mixed security shelf, currently at 75 cents. We'll see if we have a little more volatility coming into these. NYLD, we have currently at $43.09. It tends to file Form C3 on or about January 19th, 2015. So, folks, that's where we are in your market overview in preparatory for this market. Remember, FOMC this afternoon at 2, announcement. 2:30 is the press conference. That will be run live on financialjuice.com, so certainly tune in. Folks, thank you for joining us on Unusual Activity, powered by financialjuice.com, with George Avedon and Milton Marmonides. Thank you for joining us. We wish you a great day and happy hunt and good hunting. Thank you.